Welcome to the Gaming Bench. Today I'm going to make an ancient Roman game called Duodecim Scriptorum. We've seen examples of this game carved into stone and marble all throughout the empire, but today I'm going to make a version out of leather. All right, let's get to it.
Really struggled to figure out how I wanted to build this board. I could make it out of wood, like always, and I thought about maybe doing some hand carving into a lighter wood, but I don't think I'm there yet. That's something I definitely want to do in the future, but not for this. And then since it's a Roman game, I thought, well, I could make it out of marble or some sort of tile. You know, I made my Ludus Latrunculorum board like that. This is just made out of tile. I got it at Home Depot. But I've kind of already did it, and this thing is super heavy. This is 5 pounds of game board, so I don't want to do that again. So I landed on leather. I'm going to make it a leather game board. You know, keep it kind of straightforward and simple, but still maybe add some design to it so it looks good. All right.
Duodecim Scripta is a pretty simple game board. It's 6 spaces repeated 3 times in 2 sets. The game's a little complicated in that you come onto the board here and you go around, but for a deep dive into the rules, history, and strategy of the game, I'm going to drop a video next week that covers all that, so check that out. Now, traditionally, the Romans wouldn't just have spaces here, they'd put little words and phrases on them. Sometimes things like, you know, everyone loves to play, or sometimes snarky things like, give up your seat, you don't know how to play, let someone else in. So I tried to mimic that. And honestly, this might have been the hardest part of the project. I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out a phrase that was fun. So what I ended up with is, all men hunger to play, but eat a loser buffet. So maybe a cautionary tale. And do you see this? That mark? I dropped that damn Ludus Latrunculorum board on my leather during the intro, and now I have this mark I need to work around. Okay, I'm going to case the leather, transfer the pattern over, and then we can get started for real. I have the template pinned to the leather, and I'm just going to go over it with this tiny ball stylus. I'm not trying to actually cut into the leather at this point. I'll come back with my swivel knife and make crisp lines on everything, but I just want to transfer the pattern into the wet leather right now. All right. Whoa. Looks pretty decent. Again, I haven't cut the leather yet. I'm just scoring the design in there, so I'll have cut lines to follow when I come back over with my swivel knife. For these 3 circles that are dividing the 2 spaces, I'm going to put a stamp inside this circle. Part of the reason I wanted to stamp this now is now I can adjust the circles when I cut them to make it look like I didn't stamp them off center. All right, it's getting a little dry. Wet it a little bit more. And then time to start cutting. Those circles are terrible. Wow, I really hate that. Ugh. Everything else is nice straight lines. Why did I think I should put circles in the middle of this crap? All right, well, nothing to do but keep going and figure that part out later. That's pretty good. Pretty happy with that. Except for these two rosettes. Oh my God, they're so bad. It's embarrassing. I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have to put a texture over these to hide those because they're horrible. Way too bad to continue to exist on this otherwise kind of nice piece. Put a border on this. That'll be the inside border, and then I'll put a slightly thicker outside border on it. And this will be my cut line when I finally finish this. This is starting to get pretty dry, so I'm going to case it again and then come back with my texturing tool. All right, let's see if we can erase any sign of this horrible mistake I have made. Yeah. I think if you weren't looking for it, you would never know it's there. Oh, got a little arthritis in my hands, so this kind of sucks, holding this stamp for this amount of time, but pretty pleased with how this is turning out, though. Still might have to do something with these because I did cut the leather to make those circles. So it's still more apparent than what I'd really like, but not sure. And now that I look at it, I'm really tempted to go in and stamp the inside of all those letters too. But I think I'm going to leave well enough alone. This looks pretty good the way it is. Or maybe I'll go around the edges with the beveler just to give a little more dimension, clean up these lines a little bit. Yeah, let's give it a go.
This dried overnight. I cut it out, beveled the edges, and now I'm going to add a little bit of color to this background. I'm just going to use that dark brown. It's really my go-to. I thought about adding a color to it, like green or red or something, but since this is a Roman game, it seemed more appropriate to keep it kind of black and white. And as always, here's hoping I don't drip it where it's not supposed to be. This dye is starting to bleed through the cup. Looks pretty good. Now, again, I'm tempted to go in and fill in the inside of these letters, but I'm not going to, because two reasons. I think the cuts aren't uniform enough to prevent this dye from bleeding all over and making it look terrible. But more importantly, I think it would make the letters stand out too much, and they're really squares to move your pieces around on. So I don't want that to be the entire visual emphasis. Now this is still a little splotchy. Since I've stamped the leather, that essentially means that I've changed the density, right? That I've made it denser in spots where it's stamped, so the dye takes a little bit differently in those spots. But that's all right, because I still have to go over the whole thing with a layer of that gel stain. And that will even things out a little bit. But the last thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of color to the border. All right, it's not completely even the whole way around, but again, once I finish the edges, that should even out. And I'm happy I managed to paint this whole thing without spilling this ink or this dye even once, which is not usually the case. I'm all but done with this, except of course for this center section. I don't know if it shows up on camera, but you can see the cut lines, and I'm never going to be happy with it unless I disguise it better than this. But I'm going to set this aside, and I'll figure that out later and move on to playing pieces. So a board like this, usually I would use just these glass tokens that I have 100 of these. And that would work okay, except the game does involve stacking pieces. So instead, what I've done is I cut a bunch of 1/4 inch walnut plugs, and also southern yellow pine, which I know is kind of an odd choice, but I like the grain pattern, how it looks. And also, I happen to have a piece of 1/4 inch southern yellow pine just sitting around. So I'm going to keep these simple. I experimented with a couple ways to jazz them up, maybe add some decoration, some flourishes to them, but nothing really worked. So these can just stay simple. I'll just put a clear coat on these and call it good. Now to figure out that board. I have a plan. But first, to give you some insight into how I approach projects, here's what I considered. I have some decorative washers that I thought I could put on there, and I like the way that looks, but they're not wide enough to cover up the actual cut lines. And also, these are bronze, and I don't have any bronze colored rivets to attach them, so that's not going to work. I considered I have these little 1-inch wooden discs, I thought that might look interesting, maybe paint something on those, but they're too high, and I think they stick out too much. I have these replica coins, and I was really sold on this. They cover up the circles almost perfectly, and I could just drill a couple tiny holes in them and stitch them on. And I really like the way this looked, but also because they're these metallic coins, they really draw the eye, and they don't do anything. They're not part of the game. So it seemed like I was putting too much visual emphasis on these coins if I were to use that. So what I finally decided on is leather. So I have a real thin piece of leather here. This is like 2-ounce garment leather. And first I tried some squares. So if I could just put another square between them and maybe stamp it or do something with it. But I abandoned that, and here's what I'm going to do. I cut a piece of that same leather, and I carved a pillar shape on it. So it kind of looks like a Roman pillar. And in these historical game boards that I've seen, they often have some sort of dividing line between the two sets of squares. So this works, right? Thematically and functionally. So I just need to attach it. I could glue it down, but honestly, the second the board flexes, it's going to pop off. So I punched holes around it. I'm going to stitch it down. So the first thing I need to do is poke a bunch of stitch holes. Now, I need to actually punch through the leather. Looks like I forgot to press record on my camera when I started this, but I'm just sewing this pillar down with waxed linen thread using a simple saddle stitch. Had an idea while I was sewing this up. Instead of just sewing this flat, what if I added some dimension to it? Specifically, took a little piece of dowel, stuck it in there, and then sewed it over. That would give some dimension to the pillar, and it would also give a reason for this piece to be sewn down. It wouldn't just randomly sewn on. It would look very purposeful. And I can tell people, like, yeah, this is what I intended to do all along. And I don't have to talk about my major screw up. So don't rat me out, huh? Ah, nuts. Broke that needle. Come on. That looks great. I'm kind of shocked at how this last minute addition really changed things. Now it looks purposeful. Looks like it was always meant to be there. All right, now I'll finish this with a couple coats of Resin, just an acrylic top coat. I'm out of paper towels. That's what I got. And done. Gotta say, pretty happy with the way this turned out. I was really worried about this screw up in the center, but this dimensional pillar recovery I came up with, I'm really happy with the way that turned out. If you want to learn more about the rules, history, and strategy of Duodecim Scripta, I'm dropping a video next week that goes into all sorts of depth with that. Hope you'll tune in. And as always, if this is the kind of stuff you like, I hope you'll like and subscribe. All right, catch you next time on The Gaming Bench.